In tonight's In Depth, CBS's Carter Evans goes to the country's busiest port.
Starting today, all cargo leaving China and heading for the U.S. will now carry a 30% tariff.
So people are saying the ports of LA and Seattle are empty.
There are no shipping containers. It is empty.
And saying Trump's tariffs against China.
Here's Los Angeles, one of our busiest ports. Nobody's there.
This is not a joke. This is Shanghai right now. Every one of these circles is a cargo ship just sitting there. Now let's take a look at America. This is LA, one of our busiest ports. Literally nobody's there.
Over 50,000 containers vanished from U.S. ports in April 2025 alone. In Seattle, one of the busiest ports in the country, not a single container ship has docked in recent days. At Los Angeles and Long Beach, vessel traffic is down by as much as 44% compared to the same period last year. This is not merely a temporary slowdown, it's a clear warning sign of a looming supply chain crisis. At the same time, American consumers are seeing prices on food and everyday goods rise by 8 to 12%. Imports are drying up. Major CEOs are pausing shipments and retailers are sounding the alarm. We don't know if we'll have enough stock to sell next week. At the root of it all is a deeply controversial policy, President Donald Trump's broad-based tariffs reinstated during his current term. While he claims we lose less money when we stop importing from China, the reality is starkly different. Americans are paying more for less.
That means we lose less money. You know, when I see that, that means we lose less money. Look, China was making over $1 trillion, 1.1 trillion, in my opinion. You know, different numbers from 500 billion to a trillion or $1 trillion. I think it was 1.1 trillion. And frankly, if we didn't do business, we would have been better off.
So, what's really happening? Why are ports empty, businesses hesitant, consumers frustrated, and the economy weakening? The analysis below breaks down the 5 core consequences of this tariff policy and issues a clear warning for America if corrective action is not taken in time. When President Donald Trump returned to office, he quickly reinstated and expanded his aggressive tariff policy. Under this approach, the administration imposed sweeping import taxes, 145% on goods from China, 25% on imports from Mexico and Canada, and 10% on products from over 40 other countries, according to a Los Angeles Times report published in May 2025. The stated goals were familiar: to protect American manufacturing, reduce the trade deficit, and keep money in the United States. However, the core rationale that reducing imports equates to saving money has drawn widespread criticism from economists. Trump's logic, such as if we don't buy from China, we don't lose money to them, may sound intuitively appealing to some, but it contradicts the basic laws of economics. The problem lies in a fundamental misunderstanding of supply and demand. When supply shrinks while demand remains stable, prices inevitably rise. A sudden drop in imports means companies lose access to essential materials and components. As a result, businesses are forced to either increase prices, scale back production, or pause operations entirely. In every scenario, American consumers ultimately pay the price literally. In reality, businesses do not eat the cost of tariffs. Instead, they pass those costs on to consumers through higher prices in order to preserve profit margins and satisfy shareholders. This makes imported goods not only more expensive, but in many cases less accessible to middle and lower income families who are the most sensitive to price hikes. Yet, despite these realities, Trump continues to claim that people don't pay the tariffs. But grocery receipts tell a different story. As prices climb across basic goods, consumers are feeling the direct impact of policies intended to hit foreign suppliers. These types of misleading statements don't just distort public understanding, they also undermine business confidence. When economic decisions are based on political narratives rather than market realities, businesses and investors begin to lose faith in policy stability. One of the most visible and immediate consequences of President Trump's tariff policy has been the dramatic slowdown at U.S. ports, which serve as the critical arteries of the national economy. According to data from the Port of Los Angeles, by the end of April 2025, vessel traffic at the Los Angeles and Long Beach ports, the 2 largest on the West Coast, had fallen by 44% compared to the same period last year. Even more concerning, Seattle's port reported several consecutive days without a single container ship docking, a situation that port officials say hasn't occurred in over a decade. This unprecedented drop in shipping activity has had a direct and devastating impact on workers and businesses. Longshoremen have been left without cargo to unload, while truck drivers and warehouse employees have been forced into temporary layoffs or unpaid leave. Logistics firms, unable to move goods through the normal flow, are seeing delays pile up, creating a bottleneck across the national supply chain. Industry experts are sounding the alarm. The director of the Port of Seattle warned in a televised interview that no ships at the port today means empty shelves in 2 to 3 weeks. The implications are clear when imports stop at the coast, domestic distribution gets strangled at the route. This is especially true for consumer goods, electronics, auto parts, and pharmaceutical products, many of which originate from Asia and depend on steady port traffic to reach American markets. At the same time, CEOs from major retail companies have announced that they are suspending imports due to excessive tariff costs and continued uncertainty around trade policy. Many are choosing to pause operations rather than risk unpredictable price hikes or shipping delays. As one executive put it, "We're standing still waiting for Trump's next move." This climate of hesitation and policy ambiguity is already taking a toll on business planning and investment. In economic terms, ports are not just infrastructure, they are real-time indicators of commercial health. If they've fallen silent, it's a sign that broader trade and market activity is also slowing. And when America's ports go quiet, the ripple effects spread quickly through the economy from global supply chains all the way to the consumer aisle. The sweeping tariff policy has not only disrupted port activity, it has also triggered a ripple effect throughout the broader economic ecosystem, particularly at the level of businesses and the consumer market. According to recent reports from Axios and U.S. funds, CEOs across major industries in the United States are responding to the instability in strikingly similar ways. Many have chosen to pause imports entirely awaiting more clarity on trade policy. Investment in supply chains, machinery, and distribution infrastructure has largely been frozen. Hiring has also slowed, especially in key sectors such as logistics, retail, and manufacturing assembly. Several companies report that the mere increase of 10 to 25% in import tariffs has forced them to recalculate sourcing strategies, adjust product pricing, or even cancel import contracts that had been planned months in advance. The uncertainty is making it difficult for companies to operate with confidence. The consumer market is beginning to respond. Retailers have had no choice but to pass tariff costs onto customers, resulting in price hikes of 8 to 12% across a wide range of consumer goods over the past 2 months. Consumers are feeling the pinch directly at the checkout line, where prices on groceries, electronics, and household items have all jumped. Products sourced from Asia, particularly China and Southeast Asia, are becoming noticeably scarce on store shelves, further limiting options and contributing to the price surge. Beyond rising costs, the most dangerous impact may be psychological and strategic. Businesses are losing trust in the stability of U.S. policy. With trade regulations shifting rapidly and unpredictably, companies are unable to make long-term decisions about production hiring or expansion. Global firms are also beginning to reconsider their presence in the U.S. altogether, citing a volatile tax environment, rising operational costs, and an increasingly politicized business climate. What was once considered a safe and lucrative market is now viewed by some as high-risk and unstable. The consequences go far beyond lost short-term profits. This environment risks causing a long-term erosion of U.S. competitiveness. While other economies like the European Union and South Korea are expanding free trade agreements, American businesses are withdrawing from global markets not because they can't compete, but because they no longer trust the rules at home. While the Trump administration insists that tariffs are a tool to punish foreign exporters, it is American consumers who are bearing the most direct and visible consequences. According to reports from Axios and CNN, in just April and the first half of May 2025, prices on essential goods have risen between 8 to 12%. Staple items like rice flour, computer components, and lithium batteries, many of which depend heavily on imports from Asia, have seen even sharper price increases in some cases, reaching 15 to 20% due to supply shortages. For most Americans, this inflation is no longer a distant economic trend. It's showing up in their grocery carts each week, not as abstract percentages, but as tangible reductions in purchasing power. Even as the Federal Reserve maintains steady monetary policy, import tariffs are raising input costs, triggering a classic case of cost-push inflation, one of the most difficult forms of inflation to manage. This type of price pressure doesn't come from excess demand, but from rising production and sourcing costs, especially on imported goods. This is especially dangerous for working-class and middle-income households whose financial security was already weakened by the pandemic. These families now face a painful reality, paying more for the same products, or worse, being unable to buy them at all due to limited availability. Despite mounting evidence, President Trump continues to insist that people aren't paying the tariffs and that prices are actually falling. Americans are now paying more not because of natural market cycles, but because of a trade war they didn't choose, and one whose burden falls disproportionately on their wallets. This is more than an economic concern. It's fueling growing frustration, feeding supply anxiety, and pushing the economy closer to stagnation. From empty ports and delayed business investments to rising grocery bills, the message is clear. Tariffs are not an effective economic weapon without a long-term industrial strategy to support them. While Trump's policy may be packaged under the slogan, America First in practice, it is weakening domestic capacity, choking supply chains, and shifting costs onto the very people it claims to protect. Tariffs themselves are not inherently wrong, but unilateral tariffs, applied without preparation or paired investment in domestic production, risk turning the United States into an unpredictable place to do business, an unreliable partner, and an increasingly unaffordable place to live.